Arnie in for graphics. Please make sure you call me immediately. On to the return of the king. The New York Times published a column yesterday, talked about how much the NBA landscape has changed over the past couple of months. But one thing that absolutely hasn't changed is LeBron's mentality and his tireless drive to win. The article read in part, at the time, James had the Lakers primed for a title run. At 49-14, they had the best record in the Western Conference, and James was playing some of the most complete basketball of his career. But he had significant groin injury last season, and no athlete, not even James, can be dominant forever. Despite the season's idiosyncrasies, he seems determined to seize the opportunity before him. What would it mean for LeBron's future if he doesn't pick up where he left off, Nick?
Well, if he doesn't pick up where he left off, it means the Lakers don't win the title. And if the Lakers don't win the title this year, a very particular, specific window closes on LeBron. His ability to get to 6 rings. Now, I think it is obvious he does not need to get to 6 rings to be the greatest player ever. But for some folks who obviously consider, Bill Russell the greatest ever, and then Jordan and Kareem are tied because it's just count the rings, count the rings, count the rings. 6 rings would be very helpful for LeBron because he already has Jordan topped in every statistical category that matters and everything else, but Jordan has those rings. If the Lakers win the title this year, Wilds, they will go into next year as the favorites. They pull off a back-to-back, he's at 5. And then he can maybe follow the Kareem path of peeling a ring in his later years when he is no longer a dominant player. You might say later years. How many more years do you think he's going to play? I think LeBron's going to play 5 more seasons after this one. That's the minimum number of seasons he'd have to play to have any shot of playing with his son, if his son can make the league. And if right now in year 17 he's still the best player in the world, then in year 20 he'll still be a top 12 player at the very least. So I think he's got 5 more years to go along with this one. That's 6 playoff runs. If he wants any chance at 3 more rings, Wilds, in order to match Jordan, they have to cash it in this year, which is why, Kevin, it's good they're the overwhelming favorites.
I know, but do you think he needs 6 rings, Nick? Like, America, you are seeing some Nick Wright vulnerability. If you cut Nick Wright, he bleeds too. If you cut his hair, it doesn't work. But if you cut him, he bleeds. Like, you should not move on this. Do not talk about 6 rings on this show, Nick. It's not just the 6 rings, it's the losses. He says, so unless we're giving him a DeLorean, there might be a Back to the Future ride in Universal nearby in Orlando that he can get on and erase the losses. That's what he would need to do, Nick. It's not just the wins.
Okay, so couple things. One is I have not moved on this at all, but I enjoy more people joining up with me. When I went on Colin Cowherd's show 2 days after the Cavs beat the Warriors and said LeBron isn't on pace to be the greatest player ever, he is the greatest player ever, I think that was about 2% national approval rating. We saw after the Jordan doc, it's now at about 23%. The needle has moved. Eventually, 23. It's going to be overwhelming above 50%, I believe. If he gets to 6 rings, it's not even going to be a discussion. It's going to be like Gretzky and the rest of hockey. The debate is about who the second greatest player ever is, not who the greatest player ever is. The losses, there's one loss, Antoine, that's a blemish on his resume. 2011. That is it. That is the only actual blemish on his resume. Every other year, he was the best player in those finals. 2007, he wasn't the best player. He's 22 years old. So the losses don't concern me at all, but I don't think he can get to 6, which some people say he has to get to, Antoine, if they don't cash it in this season.
You don't have to get to 6. And one thing you got to think about for LeBron, every year is a challenge. So one thing you got to think about, how can he motivate himself every year? Obviously, this year he's very focused. He's trying to bring that 4th championship. But after that, he has to continue to get his body together. It's really hard work to get to play at that level, to be at MVP level. So we got to see how much more that he has to take mentally to be ready to go to continue to fight. But I don't think LeBron is chasing 6 rings. I think LeBron is chasing 1 ring in L.A. to do it with 3 different teams. I think that's where he sets the difference at. Nick, I do believe he's the best player in the league right now. Arguably, he can finish up probably the second best player to ever play the game. I still think Michael Jordan's the best player to ever play the game. But for LeBron, right now, I think it's all about getting one for the Lakers. I think that just to be a part of the Kareems, the Magics, the Kobe Bryants, I think he wants to be on that list that's brought championships to Los Angeles and do it with 3 different organizations. And then I think after that, it's going to, you got to find that motivation year in and year out. I mean, Father Time catches up with everybody. We know he's been unbelievable in taking care of his body and making sure he's healthy. But it's hard every year to find that motivation when you've done everything in your career and you accomplished everything. It's not about money. Obviously, he's going to get all the individual accolades. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's going to do all those things. So every year he has to find motivation to keep going to be able to be the elite. Every team he's played on, he's been the best player. He has to be the best player. I don't know if he could take a backseat role. What if he doesn't want to take that backseat role? What if he don't want to play in the later years where he's not the best player on the floor? So we got to think about those things for LeBron. But I think the window is this year and next year for LeBron to win this title.
Well, as far as taking a backseat role, Antoine, I think you saw this year with his transition to point guard that I think in his once he does start truly deteriorating athletically, which amazingly he hasn't really 17 years in, I think he'll transition seamlessly to like a super rich man's Jason Kidd, which is an unbelievable, way to be able to play at year 20. And I think that's what he'll do. But Wilds, Antoine raised, I thought, a very interesting point, which is the next step being the 3rd ring with the 3rd different team. If he were to finish his career without winning another one, I do think, while I'll still believe he's the greatest player ever, he's already accomplished it, that 23% that I said agree with me, Wilds, I think that number starts going in the other direction. If he plays 4 more years with the Lakers, they never win a title, I think it starts going, closer to 15%, 10%, than moving upwards, even when he passes Kareem on the all-time scoring list, Wilds.
I'll give you a weird one that you hate, Nick. What if he made the finals and lost? So would making the finals and losing actually be worse for his legacy than losing in the Western Conference Finals?
Oh, well, of course it would, because you have a lot of dopes in the media that think losing later is worse than losing early.
I know.
You've got a lot of folks that think, evidently, the worst thing you can do is, as an Olympian, is win a silver medal. You're far better not medaling at all. Like, it's just lunacy. So, yeah, I think the narrative, it would hurt him. We only have like 20 seconds left in the show. I promised America, Jenna, a major announcement.
Oh, here we go.
Wilds, you didn't know it, but you spoiled it. The major announcement is, guess what's happening tomorrow? I'm getting a haircut. So Monday, America, it's going to be a totally new Nick Wright. First haircut in 5 months, Jenna Wall. So Monday, I'm excited to see how I look.
We're all excited, Nick. We're all excited. Everybody, Twan, thanks.